Search is changing faster than most marketing teams can keep up with. And the people who figure it out first are going to have a massive advantage. I'm Andrew Yan, CEO of AthenaHQ. And today we're sitting down with Lily Ray, founder of Algorythmic and one of the most respected voices in the industry. If you're a marketer trying to wrap your head around AI search, or just want to know what to do with your content strategy, this one's for you. We're joined here with Lily Ray today. Lily, so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we get into it, do you mind introducing yourself? Tell us more about what you're working on right now.
For sure. So I'm Lily Ray. I'm the VP of SEO and AI search at Amsive, where I've worked for about 8 years. And I recently founded my own consultancy called Algorythmic. So I'm splitting my time between personal projects that I take on through Algorythmic, as well as supporting my team in kind of an advisory and consulting capacity, where, I work with the SEO/AEO team of about 30 people, working across many, many different types of clients. And then I try to still find time to do like research and speaking and writing articles about what's happening in the industry.
Tell us more about your hypothesis with Algorythmic.
Yeah, with Algorythmic, I would just basically want to take all of the knowledge and experience that I have over 16 years of doing this professionally, and be able to work on certain client projects that I feel are a good fit for my skills and my interests. I'm specifically, right now, I'm very interested in the overlap between what we call AEO, or many people call GEO, with traditional SEO and kind of how those two play together. But I've always been very interested in like algorithm updates and what Google's doing with EEAT. So I focus on that a lot as well.
Love the name Algorythmic.
Thanks.
So I know you're also a musician. Most people are doing one or two things in their life. Seems like you've got like 5 different things going on in your life. What does your day-to-day look like now?
Yeah, it's interesting because the last few months, I would say my workflow and my habits with work have really changed and evolved. I think with like tools like Claude Cowork and Claude Code have really transformed the way that I work. So I have a lot of little projects and tools and stuff that I'm building to try to create efficiencies within my own workflow. But generally, day to day, I'm kind of splitting my time between consulting for various brands that need support with, right now, mostly AI search. I would say everyone's really focused on that. I still get a lot of inquiries from people who have been affected by different Google algorithm updates. SEO is kind of taken a backseat in a lot of conversations right now, but I think it's as important as ever. And then I try to keep my finger on the pulse with everything that's happening in the industry, which is extremely time consuming.
It seems like things are moving even faster.
Yeah. And that's actually where I think AI can really add a lot of value. I'm building tools to help alleviate, a lot of the work that I've been doing for many years to try to stay on top of all the industry trends.
Yeah, we have both internal tooling ourselves through Claude Code and Claude Cowork, but also external tooling we're exposing to our users. And one thing I'm finding with this wave of AI, there've been waves of AI in the past. One thing I'm finding with this wave is, if you're comparing to the Zapier NAN era,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of automations you could do with Zapier and NAN, but it would take so long to set it up, and then there'd be errors, and you'd have to like click a lot of buttons to figure it out. I've been using a lot of Claude routines recently, which just run in the background, natural language, and this helped us level up as an org at Athena, but also for our customers. We launched MCP a few months ago, and a lot of them are using MCP in a weekly cadence, whereas you could have a regular job that's running, and then you pull a report on a Monday morning, for example.
For sure. Yeah, that's I think MCPs have really changed the name of the game. I think like before we had MCPs, working within an LLM, you'd get a lot more hallucinations and it wasn't as good at processing data or spreadsheets or things like this. And now being able to tap into different tools and have all of that in one centralized place, and then just to be able to talk to, the model or the agent or whatever, it's absolutely transformed the way that we do work now. It's really exciting.
Which is also really interesting from the SEO's perspective. If you're watching this from SEO, and we see the future of organizational work moving more towards like enterprise ChatGPT or an enterprise Claude. A non-significant portion of our customer base is already using Athena through the enterprise Claude, enterprise ChatGPT instance. How do you think about the future of what being SEO at a large company looks like in that world?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting right now is different companies have different, I guess, like tolerances for AI and willingness to dive in. So, working in an agency, one thing that's interesting is number one, we have to protect our clients' data above all else, right? So, we have to be careful with what kinds of tools we build and how we're using client data and everything. So I think for a lot of brands right now, they're kind of navigating what that looks like and even building tools internally and everything. But I do think generally speaking, the future of our role as SEOs or GEOs or whatever is going to be being able to integrate all of those tools into one place and just kind of know which tools to talk to and which reports to have, like you said, like automated. And so we could have like a weekly or daily roundup of how our performance is doing. And then just being really innovative with like building different tooling for different needs. I think that's been the most exciting thing lately is like, there's all these big projects and analyses that I want to be doing or like want someone to be doing in the background, like for me to be able to kind of surface those insights. And now with like Cloud Code and Cloud Cowork, I have these kind of ongoing routines where I don't have to go analyze all the hundreds of URLs manually like I used to do. Now I can kind of have that analysis done for me. So I think it really supercharges professional SEO people to be able to just work like 100 times more quickly than they could before.
And sometimes it feels like managers want them to work 100 times more
Yeah.
than before.
Yeah, also that, yeah.
If there's one tip, Lily, you could share with listeners today that has had the highest up leveling on Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork, what has it been?
Well, I think at the bare minimum, finding ways to incorporate, whatever source of data you're using to analyze site performance or sources of data. So, Search Console and Analytics, Google Analytics, of course, for many, many people. But then MCPs like Athena, like pulling in the different data sources that you're using to monitor performance into one place. So you can talk to your LLM of choice about performance instead of having to go and analyze everything. I think that's probably like bare minimum. Everyone should try to set that up.
Cool. Want to move into some hot takes you have. So you've been one of the clearest voices on EEAT for years. What do you think most marketers still get wrong about this?
Yeah. Well, EEAT, it stands for Experience, Expertise, Authority, and Trust. It's an acronym that Google created probably about 10 years ago at this point. And they basically use EEAT almost synonymously with like content quality and content trustworthiness throughout a lot of their documentation. So there's a document called the Google Search Quality Rater Guidelines. It's publicly available. It's 160 plus pages, and they use it to train, and they've used it for many years to train human search quality raters who basically grade how well Google's algorithms and results are doing with meeting their criteria for EEAT. So there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about how this works. I think in classic SEO fashion, a lot of people try to take this EEAT concept and kind of like gamify it or like distill it down into like, oh, we just need to do this quick checklist and then our EEAT will be done, right? But it's not that simple. I think for different websites and different categories, EEAT is going to look and feel different for different companies. And what my team and I have helped companies with over the years is like, what does it look like to be an authoritative, expert-driven, experienced, high trust, high quality brand in your space? And there's all kinds of different ways that could manifest itself both on and off the website. So we've been doing this kind of holistic approach to helping brands convey that EEAT throughout their content and their social media and everything for a long time. And I think that's the way that I view it. I think a lot of people in this space, they want to make it into like, with SEO, we have a lot of things that are kind of like checklist items. And I don't think that EEAT is a checklist. I think it's something that's dynamic and fluid depending on the client's industry.
Yeah, it's more like a principle than a like check the 4 boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah. One thing we're noticing, as well as the SEO can be cyclical, and there can be this vicious cycle where the short-term tactics, and then Google patches them or whatever search engine patches them. Right now, we're seeing a whole wave of mass AI content flooding the internet. Where do you see us in that cycle right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been talking for a few years about what I call the cycle of SEO. Now I call it the cycle of SEO/GEO.
Yeah.
So I've been doing SEO for 16 years, and it's interesting, right? Because these cycles happen, they're probably, let's call it like 2 to 3 year cycles. And depending on when you enter the space, you don't necessarily know what that cycle is going to look like. And I think basically the way I see it is there's certain types of tactics that can work really, really well to influence whether it's search engine rankings or now GEO visibility. And the reality is Google and Bing and OpenAI, they don't want people spamming their results, right? We think of it as optimization, but in many cases it's spam or manipulation. And so they identify what those tactics are. In many cases, it's not hard for them because there's a lot of people out there publicly sharing what they are, right? On YouTube and conferences and everything. So Google is always watching, it's clear that they're paying attention to what's happening in SEO conversations and everything. And they take a lot of time to collect signals, and then eventually they drop some type of really big algorithm update. Sometimes it's an unconfirmed update, so they won't tell you that it's happening. Sometimes it's manual actions, which are like literal messages from Google that you've been penalized. So it can take all different forms, but it always inevitably happens. It's never been the case that there's been like all types of spam happening on Google and they haven't done something about it eventually. So I think we're in the interesting point in the cycle right now because so many new people have entered doing this like GEO thing who don't necessarily, first of all, understand the relationship between what they're doing on the GEO side and the SEO side, and also don't understand that even if there's a new type of loophole or exploit or something that people have identified now, it doesn't mean it's not going to be patched up later. And what I've seen is when the loopholes get patched up, you often wish you never did them in the first place because it can affect your site in such a way that it can be really, really difficult to recover.
One question I get asked a lot, I'm sure you do as well, is what's the trick to AI search? And the answer I like to give is there is no short-term, like you do this one thing, this one tactic, and then you succeed. There really isn't a shortcut. It's more, geo is a function of your marketing team, which is not something that happens overnight and takes time to build.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think I don't think there are shortcuts ever with SEO or GEO. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't things that are loopholes that work right now, right? So I think that's what I mentioned before with the cycle of SEO. I think that there's certain things that are working right now that OpenAI and Claude and everybody probably don't want working, and they're probably looking at ways to fix.
Top 10 best software tools for
XYZ. I mean, like the most obvious one is these listicles where everybody puts their brand number one. I'm actually really shocked it's taken this long for these companies to start addressing it. I did see the first sign in around January 20th of 2026 where Google, it was actually an unconfirmed update, so they didn't say anything, but I noticed in my tools, like all types of, mostly like SaaS companies, a lot of them were getting hit really hard. Like their blogs were kind of dropping really fast in Google. And lo and behold, most of them were doing those types of listicles, like dozens or hundreds or thousands of them. So I think, we're still, I would say, in a bit of a gold rush and a bit of like the Wild West part of the cycle where there are a lot of these tactics that work. So I am not going to sit here and say like right now at this moment, listicles don't work because they do, right? But I don't foresee that as a long-term strategy. I see that as something they're going to patch up eventually. So when you think about the way that they're going to patch things up, my approach is I want to play the long game so that when all the other exploits are patched up, I'm still there. I'm still visible. I'm still growing. And I think when you look at it that way, there aren't really shortcuts for that.
Yeah, that's a sustainable way to go about for SEO, AEO, GEO. I'm curious, one thing, maybe if you're a top brand, that's invested a lot in SEO, but your brand isn't showing up or isn't as prominent in AEO, GEO, what's the most common reason you see why?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have framed it that way, where it's like, oh, your brand can be ranking number one on Google and you're invisible in ChatGPT. And I'm like, okay, normally it's not that it's invisible. It's just that maybe they're not asking the right prompts to get that brand to show up. But for sure, there can be differences. I think in terms of like purely not being visible, usually it's some type of JavaScript problem, right? Because Google is able to process and render JavaScript better than something like a ChatGPT. So it could just be that. But also, I think there's a difference between, ranking well on Google and then being the brand that's the most recommended brand. There's not always a one-to-one overlap there. So I think with AI search, we have to become a lot more focused on both the pulse that our brand has offsite in terms of like what is the content that we're creating across platforms, and also how are we being talked about on relevant, mostly like social media sites and forums as well.
That's one big area that we see a lot of our customers looking into is, okay, we invest a lot into on-site. What do we do now for off-site? And our data shows that the average AI response comes with between 7 to 15 sources per response, depending on which model. Some models might pull fewer. Like we noticed Claude tends to pull fewer, while others like Gemini and AI Overviews, AI Mode especially, will pull a lot more. One thing we're also noticing is, and we're making a bet on it, is that as the cost of compute goes down and the latency of compute goes down, I'm sure you played around with deep research and all these tools. It's just an objectively better experience where you have a lot more data to pull on with deep research. For context, you have regular ChatGPT and you have the ChatGPT search function. And on top of that, you can also have deep research where it can pull from 30, 40, 50, tens of different sources and analyze that. The main bottleneck right now is that it just takes too much time, and I can't use it for everyday questions. But as that goes down over time, we only see the off-page side becoming more and more important. Tell us more about what you see on your end, what you're hearing from your clients, what they're doing on that side.
Yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest way that all of this has evolved in the last year or two. Funny enough, in the SEO space, depending on who you were listening to and whose work you were following for a long time, there were people talking about this as part of the SEO conversation for a very long time. I mean, first and foremost, we've always had backlinks in the SEO space, which has been kind of, I call it like the currency of SEO, trying to get links from other sites. So now it's shifted a bit where it's not just trying to get links, it's trying to get positive mentions and people talking about your brand in a positive way. So I think for us at Amsive, that's manifested in working with our social media team a lot more. They have a Reddit offering and social listening tools and everything to be able to monitor what's going on. So our SEO, now AEO team, is working much more closely with them. But I also think thinking about organic visibility off of the brand website is increasingly important. So, for me, it's also an extension of EEAT, where it's like, are there people at your company that can provide helpful thought leadership and can, contribute to the conversation across their platform of choice, and ideally the platform that in your industry language models tend to be looking at more. So it might be like Reddit conversations. And depending on, again, the client, they have different abilities and interests in having these types of approaches. But like in an ideal world, you're getting the experts from a company to go talk about their subject matter expertise on Reddit. You're getting them to post, LinkedIn Pulse articles when they have something interesting to say. Maybe they start a Substack, or maybe they start a Medium blog or something. So it's like having these original insights and ideas shared across platforms as a way of kind of like getting your brand name out there, I think is more important than ever before.
And I think that's a big evolution in how SEO has changed, where the original backlink mentality needs to change into brand sentiment, how your brand is portrayed across this long tail of different websites.
Yeah.
We have customers where they're looking at this long tail of hundreds of websites, and they've devised long tail strategies to actually action on this long tail, and have seen some pretty incredible success just from off page on that side.
Cool.
One other evolution we see is that depending on the type of company, they may want to optimize for different AI models, depending on where their customers live. Even helping brands optimize for multiple different AI models, how do you treat each one differently? And is there an underlying strategy that covers everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's a really important note that a lot of people in our space like to call out, where it's like they're not all the same model. They don't all work in the same way, but there's only so many tweaks and optimizations and everything that we can do, right? So I think if we were to split hairs all day and say, we think this works for Perplexity, but this works for Claude differently and this and that, like, I think at the end of the day, the strategy and the tactics don't change too much for different platforms. I think the whole JavaScript conversation is important, because I think that is one thing where language models can get stuck, and you want to make sure that they can see your page content. But otherwise, I think we generally adopt the same approach of basically the SEO work that we've done for a long time, which is to make the website as discoverable and indexable and easy to understand as possible, plus content strategy. So, making sure that now we have to think about the content strategy slightly differently, because I think people are obviously searching in different ways with LLMs. So that's transforming a bit of how we talk to the consumer, in terms of the content. But I would say, I don't think our team is doing too much of like splitting hairs on tactics for different models. However, one thing that comes to mind is like the UCPs and the ACP and everything for e-commerce websites.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of new considerations there. So we're just making sure that e-commerce sites are ready for all agentic commerce.
Yeah, maybe let's double click into that. What work specifically are you doing with your clients on the agentic commerce side?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a big learning experience, right? Because these new protocols are evolving every day. And I mean, Google, like I think this morning or yesterday, put out a new document about making your website ready for agentic search and agentic commerce. So we're still learning. At Amsive, we have a team of about 6 specialists that only focus on really technical SEO tasks every day. So they have been learning UCP, commerce feeds, agentic commerce protocol, all these new kind of specifications and getting our clients ready. Right now, I think a lot of it's in like the waiting phase, but it's moving so quickly. Probably in a month, it'll be ready to go. But we're definitely like trying to just make sure that our clients are checking all the boxes as far as being compliant with these new protocols.
Yeah, I was at a Stripe conference, I think 2 months ago, talking about ACP, and what was really interesting is that the analogy to the old commerce world seems to be similar to developing like a HTTP protocol, or in banking, you have Swift, you have ACH, all these different wire transfers. Was where we see AEO fitting into this agentic commerce world is it's like a funnel, right? You have discovery, evaluation, and then you have the checkout. And ACP, UCP are both on the checkout stage, but actually they don't cover the upstream part of evaluation, discovery.
Yeah.
And that's where AEO, GEO, and SEO is still extremely relevant, where if you have the best checkout experience, but no one is finding out about your brand, then no one's checking out on your whatever portal, wherever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to the fact that this whole approach, this whole like umbrella of AEO, GEO, SEO is not just one thing. It's lots of different moving parts at the same time, which is why, again, like my team is 30 plus people, and some people are only focused on technical, some people are only focused on content strategies, some are only focused on offsite metrics. So it's like you need to be doing all the things at the same time in order to be both visible and also to provide a good experience when people are taking action on your site.
It sounds like a huge headache for marketing leaders.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
So I imagine a lot of CMOs and marketing leaders out there are hearing from their board or from the CEO that, hey, we need to get on AI search and we need to get on it now. If you were advising a CMO or like a marketing leader on what they should be doing if they're starting from 0 on AI search or close to 0 on AI search, what would you recommend them do first?
Oof, that's a good question. It's a tricky question. The main thing that I've been focused on right now is education, because I think there's a lot of forces at play in our industry that are trying to get the attention of CEOs and CMOs and get them really excited and anxious about AI search, and then sell them some type of solution, right? And I think that is maybe okay depending on what the solution is, but I think there's a lot of solutions out there right now and self-proclaimed experts who don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, So I think you have to be skeptical and be careful, because there's a lot of that happening. But I think for me, believe it or not, I mean, it's pretty obvious given my background, but I think the most equipped people to handle this change are generally going to be your SEO, your experienced SEO practitioners. And that's just because so much of AI search is web retrieval. The way that these language models work is they're pulling from live web search. And we've seen it over and over with a lot of new research coming out in our space, which is the single best thing you can do to be visible in AI search is to be really visible in search engines as well. And there's so many steps that you have to take to be visible in search engines. It's the technical SEO, it's the crawling and rendering, it's the structured data, it's like content quality, it's page speed, it's all these things. So I think SEOs are really well equipped, and every SEO right now is trying to learn AI search as quickly as possible. So I think, it's not that SEOs are doing it some old-fashioned ways. They're also innovating and trying to stay ahead of the pulse. So I think working with experienced SEOs that are interested in AI search is a good place to start. But I do think there's a lot of new layers on top of it, right? I think you need to think more about digital PR, and making sure that your SEO, AEO, GEO team is working with your digital PR people and your social people. They should be working together. But I do think, there's been a lot of what I think of as like misinformation and incorrect framing as SEO being dead. So I would not buy into that hype.
SEO being dead is a very catchy and
Yeah.
alluring headline. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not correct.
One thing we are noticing is that within some of our customers, the SEOs are stepping up and taking on the leadership role, owning the AEO
For sure.
initiatives. And we're seeing some of them are, PR doesn't, we usually don't see PR report to SEO, but some of them are literally suggesting to PR teams, here are the publications we need to be getting on.
Mm-hmm.
Here's exactly what we need to be talking about on there. Cool. So to wrap up, before we close, I'm curious, what are you most fired up about right now?
I am most fired up. I launched my consultancy a few weeks ago publicly, and I'm excited to dig into the projects that are coming my way, especially with having like AI as an assistant. I think it's never been a more exciting time to be a consultant because, in the past, I probably would have had to bring on people, right, to do a lot of the support work. And now I can develop systems and processes with AI to be able to do it all myself. And I wanted to be a one-woman show for a long time, as long as possible. So I think it's really exciting for me because, it was many years of thinking of starting my own consultancy, and I was very anxious about being able to do it all myself because I really just wanted to be one person. But now it feels really achievable, with the support of like different tools that I'm building. So just, I'm sure we all feel the same way, but it's almost like addicting building all these tools with vibe coding and everything. So I'm actually more invigorated and excited about my work than I have been in a long time.
Amazing. How can people follow your journey and learn more about you and Algorythmic?
Yeah, so I always say you can just Google my name and pick your platform of choice. Generally, you can find me up there. But right now, I post daily on LinkedIn, almost daily. And I post on X a lot as well, and Blue Sky. But Substack is where I don't write very frequently, but when I have a lot that is on my mind and I want to say it all in one place, it's on my Substack.
Amazing. So go check out Lily's LinkedIn, X, and Substack. Great. Well, Lily, this is awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
For everyone listening, you know where to find us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Big thanks to Lily Ray for joining us here today. Make sure to check out her website and follow along her journey on LinkedIn, X, and Substack. And if you want to see, act, and win on AI search, check us out at AthenaHQ.ai. We'll see you next time. Take care.